Why is improv so hard? Hey everyone, I'm Matthew Cornwall with Get Taped here in Atlanta, Georgia, one of Atlanta's original audition taping services, which I co-own with my amazingly talented, beautiful wife and best friend, Brooke, who is an amazing improviser. And now on to our topic. Why is improv so hard? We've covered the topic of improv a couple times before on this channel, but it's such an important tool for the actor, so I keep coming back to it. And today I want to approach it from the perspective of why is it so hard? Or at least it seems that way. Well, let me start with the basics of improv. There are several rules that govern the art form of improv. The most basic and the most famous is the concept of yes and. It's such a deceptively simple concept. If your partner offers information to the scene, they describe the environment, they describe themselves, and most importantly, they describe you, well, then you cannot deny that information. You must accept it as fact. That's the yes part. Just as important, though, is that you need to then contribute back to the scene. That's the and. Think about building a brick wall with your partner. If you subscribe to this philosophy of yes and, then you build that wall very, very quickly because you look at your partner's brick and you agree that's a good brick, and then you add a brick on top of the wall. They agree to that. They add one. You agree. Add. And the wall gets built in no time. If we were to allow yes, but, it's like you looking at your partner's brick, agreeing that's a good brick, but maybe arguing over its placement. And so you spend all this time trying to work out where that brick should be laid, and you're wasting time, and the wall is not getting built. If we just allow yes, well, then you're putting the onus on your partner to carry the weight of the scene, to build that wall by themselves, because you agree with each brick they offer, but you're not doing anything. You're just sitting there watching. And if we allow no, well, then we'll never get anywhere in the scene, because that's like you staring at your partner's brick and saying, no, I don't like that one. And then they offer up a different brick and you say, nope, still don't like that one. And so you're not contributing to the scene, and you're also preventing your partner from making any progress either. So yes and. Simple, right? But why is it so hard to implement? Well, because the real world doesn't work that way. Since birth, you've been conditioned through negative programming. When you were learning to walk and you almost touched that hot stove, someone yells, stop, don't do that. And when you were leaving a store and you try to go running out into that busy parking lot, someone yells at you, don't do that. But then you get into school and you're being told not to cheat on your partner's tests. You go to a restaurant with the family and they tell you don't behave that way. And then you get into your high school years and it's don't drink, don't do drugs, don't have sex, don't. So while this negative programming starts as life-saving guidance, if it perpetuates like this into our teen years, our formative years, it ultimately can stunt creative growth. We've also been conditioned to think for ourselves, look out for ourselves, to be ambitious, to grab what is ours, to be skeptical, all of which can be in opposition to the creative mindset needed for improv. And fundamentally, we all have a sense of self-preservation. So when we get nervous or go into fight or flight mode, it's likely that we're not thinking about our partner. We're thinking of ourselves. And this selfishness can make it super hard to categorically say yes to that weird thing my partner just said. So it can take weeks or months and sometimes years to get to a point where yes and has become part of your DNA. When you do get to that point, though, it is glorious. There's so much freedom. Freedom to be a kid again. Freedom to be silly without any self-judgment. It's part of what makes improv so satisfying and so addictive. It's also why it will make you light years better in your scripted acting. I'm talking about TV and film when you are not deviating from the script, not even by a word. Yes, improv will just change the way you approach this entire art form for the better. And another basic tenet of improv is to not ask questions, especially as a beginner. Because if you're new to improv, all of your questions will be fear-based. You'll be throwing the onus back on your partner to carry the scene. What are you doing? Who are you? Why? How? Huh? My favorite way to look at questions is to think about it this way. When you ask a question, you're telling your partner, hey, I have an idea. You come up with it. Because you're speaking, you're adding words to the scene, so you're presumably having an impulse of some sort. You do want to talk about something, but then by putting a question mark at the end, you're forcing your partner to do all the heavy lifting. So it's not very helpful to them. But avoiding questions is so hard. Why? Well, for a lot of the same reasons that yes and is hard. In self-preservation mode, it's so much easier to let your partner do all the work. That way you can stay over here and remain skeptical and just be on the periphery of the scene. And you do feel like you're contributing when you're asking questions because, you're talking, but it's not really helping the scene in any way. So again, it can take months or even years to feel like you've achieved any sense of proficiency, let alone mastery in the art form of improv. And just like working out at the gym, if you take a lot of time off, you will atrophy because the real world doesn't want you to think and act that way. So if you leave class, leave the art form, leave the stage, as it were, for an extended amount of time, then you will start to revert back to the norms of society. So then when you do get back into an improv class, it will take a little bit of time to reacclimate to the rules, to the world of improv. But there's one final element that I want to talk about that makes improv hard, even for professionals. For context, I joined my first real improv class in 2004, 20 years ago. And for 8 years, I attended class every week. For 8 years. And yet, despite all that training, even at the top of my game, there's a certain situation in which I cannot predict success. And that's commercial auditions. Well, improv-based commercial auditions, and where you're paired with someone in the audition. And the reason it's hard, well, if you're getting paired with somebody, it's almost always going to be a stranger to you. And if they don't have the appropriate training in improv, then they could sabotage you and or the scene, either out of fear or out of a sense of competition because they think they need to win the scene in order to book the job. See, one of the other fundamentals of improv that I'll share is that you must always have your partner's back. Your partner is more important than you. You take care of them. You lift them up. You save them when the scene seems to be losing steam. But in an audition, when there's a job at stake and therefore money, there seems to be this need for actors to stand out. And that means you cannot predict what that person will do in that situation. Heck, even a trained improviser can fall victim to this and revert to a selfish behavior just as a defense mechanism because they're so desperate to book. Now, on rare occasions, you will get paired with someone you know, and boy, is that glorious. I've had the pleasure of being in a couple auditions over the years with my dear friend Eric Goins, and there's a specific instance way back, had to have been before 2010, so I barely knew him at this point, but I knew that he was a professional improviser, and we got to audition for the casting director, Melissa McBride. Yes, that Melissa McBride from The Walking Dead. And we had so much freaking fun with each other and just making Melissa laugh. And we still reminisce about it to this day. But after auditioning for commercials for over 20 years, I can count on one hand the amount of glorious experiences I've had when it comes to improvising with a scene partner. And almost all those are with Eric. So what I've learned through trial and error is that you need to prepare for the worst scene partner ever, because there's a reasonably good chance you will encounter them at your next in-person audition. Because here's the thing, actors lie about their improv training. Gasp, they do? Yes, they do. Apparently they didn't watch my recent video on when it's okay to lie. Spoiler alert, never. Except if they ask for your age, which they're not allowed to do for discrimination reasons. And so you have my permission to lie by omission and just not tell them, or to be coy and just say, how old do you think I am? But even if they do have some training, like a one-day workshop or a class they took 10 years ago, those muscles will have atrophied and will not serve them well in this high-pressure situation. But the casting director doesn't know that. If the casting director sees that you have improv on your resume, they'll just assume that you're good. So unless that casting director is also an actor with improv training, and I count only one casting director in the Southeast that fits that description, then they'll sort of be naive to all of this and will just expect that if both of you have improv on your resume, then you should be able to make magic. If it was only that simple. So yes, it is a flawed system. And the best thing a true improviser can do is to prepare for these worst case scenarios. How? Well, here's an idea. Take a beginner improv class, like the one you took 10, 15, 20 years ago. Yeah, take it again. In short, improv is hard. It's hard to learn, it's hard to maintain, and it's hard to predict how it's going to show up in all of these different scenarios in your career when you're outside the comfort and bubble of your trusted improv friends. But it's necessary and so worth it. Brooke and I co-teach an 8-week improv class at Get Taped, and it's because we both want to be there every week. It's intoxicating. We love every minute of it. And I was going to improvise a clever ending, but I can't think of one. So that's it for now. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on set.